Officer Daniel Hayes drove his patrol cruiser down Willow Street just as the sky began to darken. The late spring air still held warmth, and a soft breeze carried the scent of blooming roses from nearby gardens. He had finished his shift early, hoping to catch a bicycle repair workshop before it closed, but the dispatcher's call for a routine welfare check in the neighborhood pulled him back to duty. His uniform felt heavy at his shoulders, and the weight of years on the force settled in his chest like stone. He told himself that this would be a simple evening, another quiet beat that he could wrap up quickly before heading home. Hayes had joined the Metro City Police Force 6 years earlier, fresh out of the academy, and certain he could make a difference. He grew up in a working-class neighborhood not far from the city center, raised by a single mother who taught him the value of hard work and compassion. He remembered how she worried every time he put on that uniform. Over the years, he learned to ignore the small voice in his mind that questioned whether he was doing enough for the people he served. He told himself that every citizen deserved respect, that every call mattered, and that he would not let fear or judgment cloud his actions. That evening, the streets seemed calm. The rows of houses were painted in soft, pastel colors, each with a neatly trimmed lawn and a small porch light glowing warmly. Families gathered on stoops, sharing stories over iced tea and laughter. A few children chased each other down driveways on roller skates, their bright helmets bobbing in and out of view. Daniel slowed his cruiser to give them space, easing the engine into a low purr. He glanced at his reflection in the rearview mirror, his dark hair combed neatly, eyes sharp and alert. Name badge gleamed under the dome light. He straightened, his posture reminding himself that vigilance kept everyone safe. Ahead, a stray dog darted from between two parked cars and bounded toward the middle of the road. Hayes lifted his foot off the accelerator and steered gently toward the curb. As the dog ran past, a sudden movement at the corner of his eye made him slam on the brakes. The tires screeched against asphalt, sending a cloud of dust into the air. He turned sharply, heart pounding, and saw a small figure tumble onto the hood of his cruiser. In that breathless moment, he saw a red balloon snagged on the antenna, and the flash of dark skin and braids flying through the air. Shock and panic flooded him as he eased the vehicle to a stop. He jumped out and ran to the front, adrenaline sharpening his senses. The street was eerily quiet. He looked down at the windshield where the balloon's ribbon fluttered like a wounded bird's wing. A crack spider-webbed behind the glass. His mind raced. Where had the girl gone? Had she been thrown clear? He scanned the road on either side. No sign of her, no cry for help. Only the soft hum of distant traffic and the rustle of leaves in the overhead elm trees. He felt sweat bead on his forehead, his breath shallow. He pressed the radio button. Dispatch, this is Unit 42, need assistance. Hit and run. Possible child involved. No victim in sight. Please send EMS and backup. He felt a tight knot of fear in his throat. He wiped his palm on his pant leg, hearing it rasp against the fabric. His heart kept beating too fast, each thump echoing in his ears. He knelt beside the cruiser and touched the front fender as if that would tell him what had happened. Over the radio came the crackle of other units acknowledging the call. He stood, taking a deep breath, forcing himself to think clearly. He needed to find the girl. She could be hurt, terrified, even unconscious nearby. He checked his watch. 7:45 p.m. The light was fading fast. Every second felt crucial. He swept the nearby lawns and sidewalks with his flashlight. The beam fell on neatly pruned bushes, on idling cars, on a recycling bin tipped on its side. He shone it into dark doorways and under hedges. No sign of footprints. No trail of blood. No dropped toy lying in the grass. The streetlights flickered on overhead, tossing long shadows that seemed to dance at the edges of his vision. He called out, voice firm but strained. Hello? Are you there? Can you hear me? His own words sounded hollow in the silence. He imagined parents calling for their child, the panic rising in their voices. He could almost hear them crying, out. Minutes passed like hours. Eventually, 2 other officers arrived, followed by an ambulance. Hayes briefed them quickly, eyes darting around the empty street. He felt the weight of every pair of eyes watching him, medical technicians setting up stretchers, officers opening notepads, neighbors peering from behind curtains. He gave them the description: a black girl, around 14, wearing a yellow dress, carrying a red balloon. But the dress could be anything, he realized with a sinking feeling. She might have slipped away, frightened by the crash or by the blinking lights. Or maybe she ran to hide. He tried to imagine what he would do, just a few years younger, lost and hurt, with strangers all around. As the paramedics finished their checks and cleared the scene, they confirmed there was no victim, no evidence of anyone struck. Hayes signed off on the report and watched the ambulance pull away. The other officers spread out to take witness statements from residents, but nobody admitted to seeing anything. He felt cold dread settle in his stomach. He walked back to his cruiser and sat behind the wheel, engine idling. He stared at the balloon still tangled on the antenna, its bright red color mocking his calm. He reached up and pulled it free, twisting the ribbon between his fingers so it snapped loose. He opened the door and tossed it onto the pavement. Hush fell over him as he closed the cruiser door. He leaned his head back and closed his eyes. Sweat chilled on his neck. He thought of the girl, running, scared, maybe hurt somewhere in the dark. His ideal of himself as a protector felt hollow now. He wondered if this one mistake could change everything. If someone had captured her, or if she was badly injured, he would carry the weight of it for the rest of his life. He touched his badge, tracing the engraved letters with his thumb. He had sworn to uphold the law, to serve the community. Now he felt he had failed at the most basic level, to keep a child safe. By the time he finally pulled away, the neighborhood had returned to its quiet rhythm. A dog barked somewhere down the block. A lone cyclist pedaled past, giving him a wary glance. He flicked on the siren and headlights briefly, then switched them off. He forced his hands to steady on the steering wheel. He would go back to the station, file his supplemental report, and then find out if the girl had been brought in anywhere. Hospital, police station, community center. He refused to close the case until he knew she was safe, even if it meant losing sleep, even if it meant spending hours driving every street in the city. He had looked into that empty street and seen not just a stranger, but a child who trusted the world to keep her safe. He would find her. Officer Daniel Hayes sat at his desk long after the station lights had dimmed. The clock on the wall read 10:15 p.m., but he felt as though time had stopped when that red balloon snapped on his cruiser's antenna. Outside, the hum of the city carried on, cars rolling by, distant music drifting from open windows, but inside him everything felt still and heavy. He stared at the folder in front of him, labeled Incident Report, Unit 42. The pages were blank. He knew he had to write something, anything, to explain how he had hit a child who then vanished without a trace. His hands hovered over the keyboard, but every word felt like a lie. He thought back to his first day on the force when he had written his very first report. He had described an elderly man lost in a supermarket, frightened and confused. Hayes had guided him back to his wife with a promise that everything would be okay. Now, he could not even promise himself that he would find this girl. He rubbed his temples and leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking beneath him. In the silence, he heard his own breathing, short, uneven, nervous. At home, his mother's voice would have echoed in his mind. Be careful, Daniel. Always. Be kind. But kindness felt useless when he could not even prevent harm. He thought of the girl's dark skin and neat braids, the way sunlight might have caught the strands, and he wondered where she was now. Hungry? Hurt? Scared? He rose and paced the narrow corridor between rows of desks. Officers had finished their shift hours ago, but he found no comfort in their empty chairs. He passed under fluorescent lights, each buzzing softly, each one reminding him of the streetlights that had flickered on just as he reached for his radio. He retraced his steps in his mind. Dog in the road, sudden panic, the girl's shape flying across the hood. He tried to calm himself with logic. He had slowed down. He had hit the brakes. But logic felt hollow in the face of fear. Back at his desk, he keyed in the first line. On June 11th at approximately 7:45 p.m., Unit 42 responded to a welfare check. He stopped. He deleted the line. He typed again. Officer Hayes's patrol vehicle made contact with an unknown juvenile subject. He deleted that too. He pressed his palms to his closed eyes, trying to make the memory disappear. It would not go away. Outside the window, the lights of Metro City flickered against the night sky. He imagined the girl somewhere in that glow, a backyard, a porch, a neighbor's living room. He ran through every house on Willow Street in his mind, imagining her hiding behind curtains listening to his radio call. What would she think when she heard the words, "hit and run," broadcast over the airwaves? Would she understand that he never meant to harm her? He feared she would see only a uniform, a stranger, someone to be trusted no more. At home, his small apartment was dark and silent. He dreaded going there, fearing he would see her face in every corner, hear her soft footsteps on the carpet. So he stayed at the station, leaning on the cold window pane, watching the city breathe. He watched as a street sweeper passed below, its yellow lights blinking. He pictured the girl picking up the red balloon by the curb, holding it tight against her chest. He wondered if she would ever trust a stranger again. He thought of the public reaction already forming. Rumors would spread. Officer hits child, lets her go. Social media posts would call for his suspension. Protesters would march outside the station doors, holding photos of a girl who might not even exist. He hated the idea of becoming a headline, his face splashed across news feeds. Yet he knew the truth would surface. Someone would find her. Someone would tell the story. He wanted that truth to reflect his side, to show he cared. But right now, he had nothing but questions. He opened his notebook and began to write in longhand, a habit from his academy days. His script was neat but shaky. He noted the time, the weather, the make and model of his cruiser. He wrote what he saw: a red balloon, a shattered windshield, an empty street. He described the angle of his approach, the speed, the sudden swerve. Each fact felt like a small step toward clarity, as if laying out the details would somehow undo the moment itself. But facts could not capture fear or guilt. He paused, then scribbled in the margin, "Find her." He returned the notebook to his drawer and turned on his computer again. This time he started a patrol log, listing every street he would check tomorrow. He planned to drive every block within the precinct, to stop and ask every neighbor, every shopkeeper. He imagined standing in front of the school gates at dawn, watching as students arrived, hoping to spot someone matching the description. He forced himself to outline a search plan, coordinate with community centers, check local hospitals, alert patrol cars on nearby beats. It was basic police work, but now it carried personal weight. He felt a call coming on. He picked up his phone and dialed dispatch. He asked them to send an all-points bulletin. A black girl, about 14, yellow dress, red balloon. He listened as the dispatcher typed, adding details. He stressed that she might be frightened, might run from uniformed officers. He asked for sensitivity. He told them he would be out in the morning at first light. He hung up, heart pounding, feeling both relieved and exposed. Hours slipped by. The station became emptier. The janitor swept hallways. The night shift officers filed reports from minor incidents. Hayes watched them work, each man and woman moving with purpose. He envied their focus. He wished he could forget his doubt and simply follow procedure. Yet he could not. He felt the story lodged in his throat, a lump of worry that refused to swallow. At midnight, he returned to the scene of the accident. He stepped onto Willow Street, the pavement cool beneath his boots. He crouched beside the curb and touched the spot where the balloon lay. He looked down the length of the block, imagining headlights cutting through the dark. He listened, only the distant rumble of the highway. He stood and walked slowly toward the neighbor's yard where he had last seen the glimpse of a yellow dress. He peered through hedges and between cars, calling softly, "I'm looking for you. I'm sorry. Please be okay." No answer. No footsteps. He felt the air shift around him as if the world held its breath. He straightened and took out his radio again. Unit 42 on foot patrol at Willow Street. Anyone in the area, please keep an eye out for a juvenile subject. He waited for acknowledgement, then knelt to examine the grass. Dew had fallen on the blades, each tiny droplet catching the glow of the streetlight. He imagined a trail of droplets, blood, tears, water, from her tiny toes to safety. He searched for footprints, but none showed. He stood, brushed dirt from his uniform, and turned back toward the station. By the time he arrived, fatigue weighed him down. His eyes burned from lack of rest. He knew he should eat, sleep, take care of himself, but he could not stop moving. The thought of lying down while she lay hurt somewhere was unbearable. He filled a coffee cup from the break room machine and sat in the corner, sipping slowly, feeling the warmth spread through his chest. He stared at the wall clock, 2:30 a.m. He thought of hearing a knock on his door the next morning. He might be in the middle of a nap on a small cot in the locker room when dispatch called him in for an emergency. He pictured himself bolting upright, adrenaline rushing anew, only to find she had been found safe, maybe at a friend's house, maybe in a neighbor's care. The relief would be enormous, filling every empty space inside him. He also knew it might not happen. She could be far away, lost, hurt. He could be wasting time chasing shadows while she lay unnoticed. His phone vibrated with an incoming message. He stared at the screen, hoping for a tip, a clue, anything. But it was only a routine update from headquarters reminding officers to submit their weekly training records. He deleted it. He stared at the empty message field for a long moment. Then he set the phone face down on the table. He would not check any more messages tonight. He had made his plan. He had the morning. He would rest, gather strength, and continue. He stood and stretched, feeling his muscles protest. He took a final look around the station, desks cleared, files stacked, evidence lockers locked. He flicked off the lights as he left, closing the door behind him. In the quiet hallway, his footsteps echoed, each one a promise. I will find her. I will bring her home. I will make this right. As he slipped out into the pre-dawn chill, he tugged his jacket tighter across his chest. The air smelled of fresh rain on asphalt. He inhaled deeply, letting the scent fill him with determination. His badge caught the glow of the lone street lamp, shining like a beacon. He marched down the sidewalk toward his cruiser, already planning his route in his mind. He felt the weight of every moment ahead, every question he would ask, every corner he would search. But he also felt something else. Hope. Not blind hope, but the steady belief that if he kept looking, kept caring, he would find the girl who vanished and bring her back to safety. Daniel Hayes woke before dawn, the sky still holding on to the last hints of night. His uniform lay ready on the chair beside the bed, crisp and dark against the pale sheet. He moved quietly so as not to wake his roommate, who snored gently under a rumpled blanket. Daniel poured himself a cup of cold coffee, bracing for the long day ahead. He felt the familiar knot in his stomach, the same one that had tightened when the red balloon snapped on his cruiser's antenna. He choked down, the last bitter drop, and finished dressing, checking his radio, his flashlight, his sidearm. He would not rest until he knew the girl was safe. By 6:30 a.m., the streets were nearly empty. A few early joggers passed him, their breath misting in the cool air. He stopped at a corner bakery, bought 2 warm donuts, and ate one as he drove toward the community center on Oakwood Drive. He had spoken with dispatch. A girl matching the description had been found there, safe but shaken. The words echoed in his mind as he wove through quiet residential blocks. Found safe. He replayed them again and again, wondering what he would say when he saw her. Apology? Relief? He hoped she would understand. At the community center, a single streetlight glowed weakly by the front entrance. He parked and stepped out, the donut still in his hand. He noticed yellow tape marking off a portion of the parking lot, and 2 patrol cars idling with their lights off. One uniformed officer stood talking with a volunteer. Daniel approached, calling softly, "Officer Hayes, I'm Unit 42. I was the one who reported the accident last night." The officer turned and nodded, stepping aside. "Morning, sir. She's inside. Quiet now. They set her up in the art room." His voice was calm but urgent. Daniel thanked him and took a deep breath. He pushed open the double doors and followed, the faint sound of whispered voices and the rustle of papers. Inside, the art room smelled of paint and crayons. Folding tables held jars of water for brushes and stacks of white paper. Near the back, a young girl sat in a plastic chair, knees drawn up to her chest. She wore the yellow dress, soft cotton with tiny white flowers, and her hair was neatly braided in 2 long plaits. In her lap, she held a red balloon, its ribbon wrapped tightly around her small fingers. Her head was bowed. She did not look up as Daniel approached. He knelt a few feet away, careful not to startle her. "Hey there," he said gently. "I'm the officer from last night. I'm so sorry. I've been worried about you." His voice wavered. He wasn't sure she could hear him through the walls of fear that might surround her. She shifted, lifting, her chin just enough for him to see her eyes, dark, wide, solemn. Minutes passed before she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. "I'm okay now," she said, her gaze fixed on the floor. "But I'm scared." Daniel nodded, his heart twisting. "I know," he whispered. "Would you like to tell me your name?" She looked at him then, really looked, as if she saw the uniform for the first time instead of just the man in it. "Nia," she answered after a moment. "My name is Nia Johnson." The name struck Daniel like a bolt. He felt as if the pieces of a puzzle had suddenly clicked together. Nia Johnson, the mayor's niece. He felt his face heat with surprise and guilt. Nia held the balloon higher now, twirling the ribbon around her finger. "I was chasing my balloon," she explained. "It slipped out of my hand when I dropped my violin case." She gestured toward a corner of the room where a battered violin case rested against the wall. Daniel's chest tightened. She was a musician, maybe practicing here at the center's evening program. If only he had known. If only he had slowed down. He straightened, offering his hand. "I want to help make sure you're safe," he said. "Can you tell me what happened after I stopped?" Nia's eyes filled with tears as she nodded. She took a breath and began in a small voice. She had chased the balloon across the street, the cool breeze tugging it higher as she reached. She remembered the sound of the engine, the glare of headlights. She stumbled and felt the hot hood beneath her palms. She heard a loud crack and then everything went blurry. When she woke, she was pulled through the open doors of the community center by Mrs. Alvarez, the art teacher, who had found her crying on the doorstep. As Nia told her story, Daniel crouched beside her listening. He noticed how carefully she chose her words, how her voice shook at the memory. He felt waves of shame and relief wash over him. He nodded, repeating pieces back to her, making sure he understood. When she finished, he told her she had shown great courage. He asked if she wanted to call her parents or speak to a counselor. Nia shook her head and pulled the balloon close. "I want to go home," she said. Daniel promised he would drive her home himself. He stood and turned to the volunteers, telling them he would take over care from there. One of them offered tissues, another stood to fetch a glass of water. Daniel checked his radio again, confirming the status of his cruiser and letting dispatch know he was about to transport the victim. He slipped on gloves and then returned to Nia's side. Outside, the morning had brightened. Sunlight filtered through tall oak trees, casting dappled shadows on the pavement. Daniel opened the door of his cruiser and helped Nia inside. The red balloon bobbed against the headrest, its string trailing across the seat. She climbed in carefully, clutching the violin case in her other hand. As Daniel drove, they rode in silence for a few moments. He watched her in the rearview mirror, noticing how fragile she looked. He cleared his throat and tried to start a gentle conversation. He asked if she liked the art classes at the center, if she had friends there. She said yes, that she loved to paint pictures of birds, and that her best friend Mia was always with her. She bit her lip as she spoke, unsure perhaps whether she could trust him. He told her quietly, "I'm sorry I scared you. I didn't see you until it was too late." He watched her face in the mirror as the words came out. She nodded slowly. "I know you didn't mean to," she replied. I was just scared." He exhaled, grateful for her kindness. In that moment, he vowed to protect her, not as a victim of an accident, but as a neighbor, as a human being. They turned onto a busier road and Daniel slowed so she wouldn't feel jolted by the bumps. He kept one eye on the rearview mirror, one on the road. The city was waking up. Delivery trucks, starting their routes, commuters hurrying to catch buses, street sweepers pushing trash cans to the curb. The world felt large again, alive with movement and possibility. When they reached Naya's neighborhood, he let her pick the spot where she felt safest to get out. She chose a small park across from her house, where a flower bed of daisies lined the wrought iron fence. She climbed out carefully, balloon in one hand, violin case in the other. She looked up at Daniel and offered the balloon as if it were a peace offering. He accepted it, feeling the cool ribbon slip through his fingers. "I'll bring your balloon back later," he promised. "And I'll check on your brother too. I heard he was missing." She nodded and turned to walk across the grass. As she reached her front gate, the sound of her mother's voice calling her name drifted through the air. Nia waved once more and disappeared inside the house. Daniel watched her go, then took a steadying breath. He still had questions and he still had a long morning ahead. He placed the balloon in his cruiser and sat in the driver's seat, closing his eyes for a moment. His uniform felt lighter now, but his heart still carried the weight of what might have happened. He would need to file a new report, one filled not with blanks and guesses but with facts and Naya's own words. He would need to speak with the mayor's office, ensuring he handled this with the respect and care it deserved. He knew the story would spread, that his act of kindness now would be measured against his mistake. He accepted that challenge. Daniel started the engine and pulled away. He glanced in the mirror at the yellow dress hanging on the wooden gate, saw Nia's tall figure stepping into her home. A wave of determination pulsed within him. He had found her. He had apologized. Now, he would do everything he could to bring her brother home, to heal the fear he had caused, and to prove that one moment of panic did not define him or the bond between a cop and the community he served. Daniel Hayes felt a cold wash of fear as he gripped the steering wheel of his cruiser. The morning light was bright, but in his mind the day still felt dark. He had dropped Nia safely at home, and she had clutched her new balloon and waved him goodbye. Yet somewhere in the city her brother Marcus was still missing. Hayes had spent the afternoon combing through witness statements and checking security footage at nearby stores, but each lead had fizzled out. Now as evening approached, he stood outside the precinct with 3 other officers, maps and photos spread across the hood of his car. Officer Logan, a burly man with a careful manner, tapped a finger on a photograph of Marcus. "Last confirmed. Sighting," he said softly, pointing to a grainy image of the boy walking down an alley behind the community center. Hayes remembered Naya's worried face and the curve of her small shoulders as she clutched her violin case. He felt a pang of guilt that he had not found Marcus sooner. "If he's out there," he said, voice low, "he's frightened. He may run if he sees uniforms." Sergeant Ruiz, the team leader, nodded. She traced a route on the map, marking possible paths Marcus might have taken. "We'll split up," she ordered. "Hayes, you and Logan take the western blocks. Jenkins and Ortiz cover east. Keep radios on silent alert, no sirens. We don't want to spook him or the suspects who might be watching." Hayes loaded extra magazines into his vest pocket and checked his flashlight. He felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. They moved out as dusk fell, driving quietly through suburban streets. Crisscrossing alleys and side roads, Hayes and Logan called out Marcus's name in soft tones. Scanning. Shadows under parked cars and between hedges. Every time a figure moved in the corner of his eye, Hayes tensed, only to relax when it proved to be a stray cat or a startled raccoon. His mind drifted to Naya's description of her brother, tall, for his age, with shy eyes and a scar by his right eyebrow. He hoped that the first person they found matching that description would be alive and unharmed. After an hour with nothing more than empty driveways and barking dogs, Hayes felt fatigue creeping in. He glanced at Logan, who gave a small shake of his head. Hayes keyed his radio to relay the update when a crackling reply came from Ortiz. "We've got movement on the rooftop of the old warehouse on 12th. Hayes's heart jolted. The warehouse had long been abandoned, its broken windows and peeling paint making it a magnet for trouble. "We're on our way," he whispered, sounding more urgent than he intended. They left their cruisers at the corner and approached on foot, sticking to the shadows of chain-link fences and graffiti-tagged walls. As they drew closer, faint voices drifted from above, urgent whispers and the metallic click of something heavy being moved. Hayes motioned for Logan to spread out to the right. He and Logan skirted the building to find a rusted metal fire escape that led up to the second level. Heart-pounding, Hayes placed his foot on the lowest rung. The metal shuddered under his weight. Logan joined him, and together they climbed in near silence. At the landing, Hayes peered through a broken window. Inside, a dim lamp cast long shadows across a concrete floor. He could see a group of 4 men gathered around a young boy seated on an overturned crate. Marcus. The boy's shoulders were tense, and he leaned forward, chin resting on his knees. One of the men held a gun casually at his side. Another waved his phone as if showing pictures. Hayes recognized one of them from previous gang-related calls, a tall man named Cruz, known for his quick temper and reputation for violence. Hayes pressed his back against the cold wall beside Logan. He reached for his radio, but thought better of it. Instead, he tapped Logan's shoulder and slid a finger across his throat, the universal sign to wait. They needed surprise. Hayes checked his sidearm. It felt comforting in his grip. He signaled Logan to circle left and cover the far doorway. Logan gave a subtle nod and melted back into the darkness. Hayes crept to the other end of the window and signaled for backup. In hushed tones, he whispered, "Sergeant Ruiz, we have visual. Marcus is alive but surrounded by suspects. Request immediate support at this location." A crackly response confirmed help was on the way. He ducked back inside, staying low as he moved toward Marcus. His uniform brushed against the concrete floor as he slid forward. The men had not noticed him yet. Their attention was on the boy and the phone screen. Hayes tapped one of the crates gently to get Marcus's attention. The boy looked up, eyes wide with fear and relief. "Marcus, I'm Officer Hayes," he said softly. "I'm here to help you." The boy's lips trembled and Hayes could see tears misting his gaze. But before Marcus could move, Cruz spun around, gun raised. In a single motion, Hayes lunged, driving Cruz backward against a support beam. The gun clattered across the floor. A second man sprang forward, fists clenched. Hayes blocked the punch with his arm, drawing his taser on the third thug. Chaos erupted. Logan burst through the far door and seized the man who had stepped between Hayes and the fallen gun. Shouts echoed off the high ceiling as Hayes yelled, "Police, everyone down!" The swing of batons and the snap of cuffs filled the air. From the corner of his eye, Hayes saw Sergeant Ruiz and Ortiz pouring through the main entrance with rifles ready. Backup arrived. The kidnappers froze, hands going up as officers trained weapons on them. Hayes ran to Marcus's side and knelt. The boy's small frame shook as he tried to stand. "It's okay now," Hayes murmured, helping him upright. "You're safe." He put an arm around Marcus's shoulders, guiding him toward the exit. Bright flashlight beams swept the area, and officers began escorting the suspects into zip ties. Hayes noticed Cruz glower at him through bloodshot eyes. He met that look without flinching. They emerged into the cool night air. Marcus glanced back at the warehouse, then at Hayes. He asked in a soft voice, "Why did they take me?" Hayes knelt again, meeting the boy's gaze. "They thought you saw something you shouldn't have. But you didn't do anything wrong. You're brave for staying calm." He patted Marcus's shoulder. Logan handed Hayes a small blanket from his cruiser. Hayes wrapped it around the boy's shoulders. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the night. Hayes's head snapped up. Officers dove behind their vehicles as gunfire erupted from the warehouse's second-floor window. One of the suspects, unrestrained until that moment, had grabbed a hidden pistol and squeezed the trigger. Kelly, the young officer on Ruiz's team, cried out as he staggered back, clutching his side. Hayes acted instantly. He dashed toward the window, ignoring the hail of bullets. He heard Ortiz shouting, Cover me! But his focus was only on saving Kelly. He reached the doorway as another shot rang out. Pain exploded in his right shoulder, and he felt himself pushed backward against the wall. The world narrowed to red-hot pain and the smell of gunpowder. He blinked, trying to steady himself. Logan grabbed him by the arm, hauling him out of the line of fire. "Get down!" Logan shouted. Hayes's breath came in ragged gasps. Through blurry vision, he saw Cruz charging toward the stairwell, shouting defiance. Hayes tried to rise, but his legs gave way. Logan caught him, lowering him to the pavement. Hayes tasted blood in his mouth. He forced his eyes open to check on Marcus, who stood trembling with Logan. The boy's wide eyes met Hayes's. Hayes swallowed hard, summoning the last of his strength. He heard Ruiz barking orders, saw Ortiz running toward the warehouse entrance with an officer's shield. He felt Logan's hand squeeze his shoulder. "We got him," Logan said, indicating that Cruz was in custody. Hayes wanted to rise, to keep going, but his vision spun. He reached for his radio and managed to choke out, "Officer down. I need medics at 12th and Oakwood." Logan didn't hesitate. He pressed the radio close, called for an ambulance, then supported Hayes's weight as the sergeant knelt beside them to check the wound. Hayes tasted copper on his tongue as blood dripped down his uniform. He forced himself to focus on Marcus, who had dropped the blanket and now stood frozen. Hayes managed a shaky smile. "He's okay," he whispered to Ruiz. "My shoulder. I'll live." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Marcus ran to Hayes's side, wrapping small arms around him. Hayes winced but returned the hug, feeling the boy's tears dampen his shirt. He closed his eyes briefly, comforted by the child's trust. He had faced his greatest fear and fallen. But he had also protected the innocent and brought a family back together. As paramedics reached them and lifted him onto a stretcher, Hayes whispered to Marcus, "You're safe now. I promise." In that moment, amid the flashing lights and urgent voices, Daniel Hayes understood the true meaning of his promise to protect. Despite his pain and the bullet in his shoulder, he had kept it. And as the ambulance doors closed and the world faded, to white he knew he would carry this night with him forever, but never as a failure, only as proof that courage could still triumph over fear. Daniel Hayes woke to the steady beeping of a heart monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen flowing through the mask at his bedside. The hospital room was bright with mid-morning sunlight streaming through the curtains. He blinked several times, trying to clear the fog from his mind. Pain throbbed in his right shoulder where the bullet had entered. He reached up and felt the bandage, then carefully eased himself to sit up against the pillows. The nurse at the door noticed the movement and hurried over, adjusting his IV drip and speaking in a calm voice about his vitals and pain medicine schedule. Daniel nodded, grateful, and settled back down. The events of the previous night came, rushing back, the rooftop standoff at the warehouse, the crack of the gun, the flash of pain. Beneath it all, he felt a deep sense of relief. Marcus was safe. Nia was safe. He had fulfilled his promise to protect them. That promise still echoed in his mind. "I will bring her home," he had whispered to himself. Now he lay in a hospital bed, confident that he had done everything he could. Late that morning, a knock came at his door. The nurse exchanged a few words with someone outside, then stepped aside. In walked Nia, clutching a small bouquet of daisies she had picked from her mother's garden. Her yellow dress was bright against the white walls of the room. She hesitated at the threshold, her braid swinging over her shoulder. Daniel recognized that same look of cautious hope he had seen on her face at the community center. "Hi, Officer Hayes," she said softly. Daniel offered a tired smile. "Hi, Nia. How are you feeling?" She shook her head. "I wanted to bring you flowers," she said, stepping closer, "and to say thank you." He waved her over to the chair by his side. "Thank you for coming," he said, "and thank you for being so brave." Nia set the daisies in a small vase on the bedside table and arranged them carefully. Marcus appeared moments later, peeking around the doorframe. His face brightened when he saw Daniel. He ran forward and gave him a hug that made Daniel wince, in pain. and smile through it. "I'm okay," Daniel whispered. Marcus patted his shoulder gently. "Thank you for saving me," he said, eyes shining. Daniel held the boy's small hand. "I would do it again in a heartbeat," he replied. They talked quietly for a few minutes. Daniel asked how Nia and Marcus were doing, how their parents were handling everything. Nia explained that Mrs. Johnson, their mother, had been worried, but was proud of her children's strength. She had insisted on meeting with Daniel as soon as she learned he was recovering. Nia told him how the community center staff had taken good care of her, and how the mayor had quietly thanked the officers for bringing his niece and nephew back safely. Daniel felt a knot in his throat at the thought of apologizing to the mayor, someone he knew respected him, but whom he might have disappointed the night before. When their parents arrived a little later, Daniel introduced himself at the door of his room. Mr. and Mrs. Johnson stood with arms linked, concern etched on their faces. Mrs. Johnson's eyes filled as Daniel apologized again for what he had put their family through. She touched his arm gently. "You saved our children," she said. "That is what matters." Mr. Johnson nodded in agreement. "You showed courage when it counted." Daniel felt tears sting his own eyes. He bowed, his head overwhelmed by their kindness. Over the next few days, Daniel's injury improved enough for him to leave the hospital. He walked slowly down the corridor, supported by a physical therapist's steady hand. His arm was still in a sling, and his steps were cautious. At the exit, he paused and looked back at the room where he had recovered. It felt like a tunnel that led back into daylight. He stepped outside into the cool breeze and took a deep breath. The city felt alive around him. Cars honking gently, pedestrians hurrying by, a street vendor calling out the day's specials. He returned to the precinct on light duty. His fellow officers greeted him with respect and relief. Sergeant Ruiz clapped him on the back. "Welcome back," she said. "City really owes you one." Daniel shook his head. "We did this together," he replied. He spent the next week meeting with detectives, sharing what he had seen at the warehouse and helping identify suspects. He also prepared his formal statement for the Internal Review Board, recounting every detail of the accident and the rescue. He wanted full transparency, knowing that the community needed to trust its officers. Meanwhile, Nia and Marcus visited the precinct to give their statements. Seeing them walk through the front doors, healthy and smiling, filled Daniel with pride. Nia told the desk sergeant that she had forgiven Daniel the moment she realized he had acted to protect her. Marcus, more shy, slipped Daniel a thank you card covered in hand-drawn balloons. It read, "Thank you for keeping me safe." Daniel pinned it to his locker door where he could see it every morning. In the weeks that followed, the story made the local news, and then national outlets picked it up. Headlines praised the bravery of Officer Hayes. Commentators spoke about the importance of community police partnerships. Some critics still questioned how the accident had occurred, but many more lauded the quick response and the way Daniel had owned his mistake and set out to make it right. Daniel watched the coverage with quiet satisfaction. He knew his career would always bear the memory of that night, but he also knew it would stand as proof that one officer's determination could save lives. Inspired by what had happened, Daniel worked with his supervisors to launch a pilot program in the precinct, Neighbors in Blue. The idea was simple. Officers would spend time each week doing non-enforcement activities in the neighborhood, teaching safety workshops at schools, helping with after-school programs, and hosting casual meet and greets at parks. Nia volunteered to help plan arts and music events, using her own story to show children how to cope with fear. Marcus offered to join neighborhood basketball games to build friendships. The first event took place on a Saturday afternoon in the very park where Daniel had dropped Nia off after her accident. A makeshift stage held a banner that read, "Neighbors in Blue, Building Trust Together." Tables were set up with snacks, coloring supplies, and information about local services. Officers wore polo shirts instead of uniforms, and children ran around playing tag while parents chatted with the officers. Daniel stood near the stage, greeting families, Some he had helped before, others he was just meeting. Nia took the microphone and spoke about her experience. She described the fear she had felt when the balloon escaped her hand, and how she had learned that uniforms could mean safety, not danger. She encouraged her classmates to speak up if they ever felt afraid. The crowd clapped, and Daniel felt tears of pride in his own eyes. He realized that this was more than a program. It was a chance to bridge gaps, to turn a single tragic accident into a force for good. Months later, the precinct received data showing that community calls for help were up, but complaints against officers were down. More children participated in after-school programs. Neighbors reported feeling safer and more willing to cooperate with police investigations. Daniel studied the reports, feeling satisfaction that came from hard work and honest effort. He knew not every problem could be solved so neatly, but he took pride in each step forward. On the anniversary of the accident, the precinct held a small ceremony. A plaque was unveiled in the community center lobby. In memory of courage, compassion, and the power of seeing a human being behind every uniform, the Johnson family stood beside Daniel as he spoke. He thanked everyone for their support and dedicated the plaque to Nia and Marcus, whose bravery taught us all to look out for one another. The crowd rose in applause, and Nia squeezed her brother's hand, smiling up at Daniel. That night, as Daniel returned home, he paused at the edge of his front yard and looked up at the sky. Stars shone clearly above. He reached into his pocket and found a small red balloon, a token Nia had given him at the ceremony. He released it into the night air, watching it rise until it became a tiny dot against the stars. He whispered, "Thank you," to the world and to himself. Inside, Daniel sat at his kitchen table, alone with his thoughts. He reflected on the journey from that humid spring evening when a child darted into the street, unnoticed and unprotected, to this moment when a whole community stood together. He thought of the lives changed that day, his own included. He thought of Nia's drawings, Marcus's laughter, and the new friendships forged between officers and neighbors. He knew there would be more challenges ahead. He would encounter cases where trust was harder to build and wounds ran deeper. But he also knew that the lessons of that night, humility, courage, compassion, would guide him through whatever came next. He lifted his coffee cup in a silent toast to the future, and as he drained the last drop, Daniel Hayes smiled, ready to face the next call, the next challenge, and the next chance to make a difference. Because he had seen how one act of kindness, one choice to care, could change lives forever.